Today's biblical bookmark is titled, The Fig Tree of Faith. How is your faith doing today? Mark tells us that if we believe, all things are possible to those that believe, and that's in 9:23. Today's scripture comes from Matthew 9:21. This is where Jesus comes upon the fig tree, gives a parable, and then goes and casts out all of the money changers in the temple. The first thing that I would like to do is to dispel the untruths that Satan has implanted in the minds of people today. Critics of Christians say that this is just another unrealistic story in the Bible. They would like us also to believe that the character of God messed up, that Jesus was confused. Other antichrists would like to point out that Jesus lost his temper and used foul language. Thus, he is a hypocrite, and a hypocrite prophet at that. Boy, I've heard it all. These above statements are ridiculous and are foolish. Did you know that a fig tree in Palestine can grow 12 months out of a year? But it only has fruit 10 months out of the year. The reason Jesus thought that this fig tree would have fruit on it is because it was a mature tree. A mature tree can be 300 feet tall, as round as a 300-pound man, and have a humongous set of leaves. The fruit appears before the leaves. Jesus seen this huge tree from afar off. One morning, Jesus and his disciples got up and they were hungry, which makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I know when I wake up in the morning, I'm hungry and I'm ready for breakfast. Thank God that I don't have to go out and scout out a fig tree that's on the earth. Today we are headed to the town of Bethany. The town of Bethany was known for its fig trees. In fact, the word Bethany means home of the fig tree. To understand the story, please read the entire chapter of Mark 11. We're going to skip the reading and for sake of time. On the way home from the temple, they would have passed the same fig tree. But nothing was said on the way home. The fig tree apparently looked the same on the outside. The next morning, however, when Jesus and his men passed by the fig tree was all dried up. The fig tree represented the Jewish people and us today. The religious leaders were unfortunately like many of our churches today. They have a form and a fashion of religion, but their hearts are far from God. They look good from the outside, but on the inside, there is evil. Jesus entered the synagogue that God, his Father, had built for worship. He sees firsthand and knows all the religious ceremonies and sacrifices. Then, as he enters the synagogue, he sees that it is empty in spirit. It's beautiful, but lacks heart and life. Similarly, this is exactly like the fig tree Jesus cursed. It appeared strong and had big roots, but it lacked good fruit. Jesus is using the illustration of the fig tree to illustrate what is going on in our hearts today. He's trying to communicate that if we are not bearing much fruit, then we'll be cut off and trodden under the foot of men. Matthew 5:13, in fact, about a year later, the Roman soldiers came in and tore down the temple. As you look around your hometown, how many temples have you seen tore down? Is this because they're like the fig tree? Finally, this is your message for today. If you do not bear much fruit, then there are consequences. If we do not follow the anointed calling on our life, which produces fruit, then this leads to death. So in final thought, the parable of the fig tree is not a picture of a confused, angry Jesus. This is an expression of Jesus that is very coherent, which shows righteous anger. Therefore, God is not always love and will punish his enemies. Frankly, this incident teaches us how to discern those who have faith and those who have worship than that just simply make a profession. Today's biblical bookmark can also be titled A Selfish Church. A selfish church. We all know what salt does because most of us use it on a daily basis. The word salt was very different in the 1st century BC. It had a much deeper meaning for those people. The salt was held in high regards, almost as high regarded as the sun. Roman soldiers were often paid in a measure of salt. The Roman soldiers then took the salt and sold it in the marketplace. By selling the salt in the marketplace, Roman soldiers actually doubled their salary. So it was truly a preservative that was vastly needed because there was no refrigeration. They lived in one of the hottest, driest climates on the face of the earth, and there was no air conditioning and no refrigeration. Therefore, they added salt to their meats in order to make the meat last a little longer. If a church does not salt the earth with good works and without the news of salvation, it is exactly like that dried up fig tree. Jesus went up to the fig tree expecting to be fed because he knew the growing process of the fig tree. That if you seen the leaves, there would be figs on the tree. But when he got there, it was all show and no works. How many times have we been into these dry churches that is all show and dry works? So Jesus cursed the tree. No, I don't believe that he used foul language in order to curse the tree. He simply spoke death to the tree. Do you realize that for the tree to die, it took 24 hours? 24 hours. The men continued down to the tabernacle where they were dead. Their spirit was dead inside of the church. And they were using the church for other things besides worship and for other things besides prayer. And Jesus cursed the church. And the church dried up. In fact, a year later, the Roman soldiers tore it down. And as the men were traveling back to Bethany, they passed the fig tree. And I believe Simon Peter said, "Behold, look at the fig tree. It's dead." I have you know